Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our live virtual community webinar. My name is Eliza. I'm the Community Education Manager here for LMN, and I'm also going to be your host to walk you through today's training. Joining me is my lovely moderator, Lex. Lex, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Lex. I'm part of the customer success team here at LMN. I'm also a growth accelerator leader, contact, if you will. I'm excited to be here, and I'm sure everyone knows Eliza is great, so it's going to be a good session.
Thank you, Lex. What we're going to do is I'm going to start sharing my screen and we'll jump right into it. I'm sure most of you, I see a lot of familiar names, and I'm sure most of you know the housekeeping by now. But if you don't, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and not the chat box. Chat is great for back and forth chatter, but we want to see your questions, so put them in the Q&A. Other than that, let's get rolling on all things job costing. Everybody see my screen okay? Should be my element screen. Perfect, thank you. So for today's training, we are going to learn about mastering job costing in LMN. We're going to talk all things best practices from settings and executing accurate job costing workflows, right? This session is built specifically for super admins, operations managers, right? Who want to track profitability with more precision. Owners, operators, this is going to be really good for you as well. It's important to note that job costing is only available for LMN's professional or enterprise plan. All right. So it will not be available if you're in a starter package with LMN. Why? I don't know. I don't make the rules, but I'm just here to tell you that it is not available for starter. It's only there for professional and enterprise. If you are a starter plan with LMN, stick around, right? Maybe you'll see some things you like and want to upgrade. But we'll get going with the setup of job costing. Now, we are going to show you with one example today, one standard example of how you would job cost this estimate that I have created. Before we jump into that though, maybe, or not maybe, we should talk about what exactly job costing is and what it's actually tracking. The key word here is actuals, okay? Job costing tracks actuals from what you've estimated. So how good of an estimator do you have? Or how good of an estimator are you, right? That's what job costing is going to gauge. Your estimates compared to your actuals, right? Chances are you'll be like, oh, great, I'm such an awesome estimator, right? All of my estimates are exactly or actually what I've, you know, uh, or what the job has stated, right? My actuals and my estimates match, or you might get a little bit humbled. We don't know, right? We'll find out when we actually start our job costing journey. But the whole point of job costing is taking an estimate you've created and then tracking it or comparing it to what actually takes place, right? What actually is used in the job, those cost of goods, what profit is made in the jobs, what costs it takes to get the job done. It's tracking that. There are four fundamental things that we look out for when we're job costing. The first is direct materials. So this is technically what we're going to be tracking or keep in mind for tracking. Direct materials, so raw materials used in the job, like mulch, sod, concrete, all of that can be tracked in job costing, right? Direct labor. This includes your crew wages and time spent on the job. So exactly how much does it cost you to put your crews out in the field? Job costing will accurately track that. Along with equipment and subcontractors, right? Think usage based when you think about equipment and subs. For your equipment and fees from outside vendors, this is just those costs. And then finally, overhead allocation. These are your indirect costs like rent, admin time, insurance, right? We all probably, when we created the budget, have a good understanding what overhead is. Job costing will also allocate for your overhead. So not only will it track your cost of goods, but also your overhead. When you track these properly, you get a clear picture of how profitable each job is, not just what you estimated up front, okay? Now, why are we doing a whole training for job costing when it's just comparing your actuals to estimates? There are a few settings and prompts that need to be applied if you want to accurately job cost, right? Not only do we want to job cost, but we want to accurately job cost. So that's what this training here is for, to show you how you can accurately job cost and what needs to be done in the back end to ensure that. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up an estimate that I have created. This estimate, job costing demo, right? Very accurate title. But if you go into work area and pricing, I have two work areas for this estimate. I have garden beds and planting, and I have patio. If you want to job cost and track all your cost of goods in your estimate must come from your price list. So there should not be any manual entries. You should be adding all of your COGS or cost of goods, right, for the estimate from the price list. So remember once upon a time when we created our budget and our price list, we added in all the material. Chances are when you're creating an estimate, you're already doing it the proper way, right? You're taking from your catalog, which comes from your price list, and you're adding in all of your cost of goods. So this is a prompt you don't have to think too much about. I'm just kind of here to tell you if you manually enter something like a material or an equipment, it's not going to show up in job costing. It does need to come from your price list. Okay? When it gets transferred over. So make sure you're using your price list when you're adding or creating your estimates. Chances are you're already doing this, okay? So we don't have to think too much about this. Another really important prompt that you must gauge is a contract. When you create any job or any estimate for a standard job, you set up a contract in the actual estimate, right? This is milestone-based billing or contract-based billing. All standard jobs are invoiced this way. We're not going to get too much into invoicing, but I just want to tell you or show you that make sure for all of your milestone types jobs, there's an invoice setting or an invoice contract in place. In order to job cost your revenue, you do need invoices ready and set to go. Okay? So make sure those invoice contracts are ready to go. If you don't have them in the job and you want to, oh, sorry, if you don't have them in the estimate and you want to create them in the job, you can do that as well. But just best practice wise, it's good to have it already created, right? So make sure this is ready to go. And then finally, what I think is the most important kind of prompt for job costing is you need to have an estimate and you need to take that estimate and create it into a job. If you do not take an estimate and create it into a job, you have nothing to compare it to, right? As I said in the beginning, job costing is comparing your estimate to your actuals. Without an estimate made into a job, there is no job costing. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this job, or sorry, this estimate that I created, and I'm going to create a job out of it. I'm going to click the create job button here. All right. And from here, it's going to say, hey, what am I tracking by? Work areas. Always track by work areas. Not only is it good for job costing, it just makes it a bit more organized, but also for reports, right? We want to pull reports later on. We'll talk about that in a second. Not in a second, but at the end of today's training. So always track your time by work areas. Okay. And then let's say this is good to go. I don't need changes and extras. Import now. So that is how you create a job from an estimate. That's essentially what I did. I created a job from the estimate. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk wage cost. Okay. So another really important prompt that's needed in the backend setting wise is wage cost. Element needs to know how much each employee is making, whether it's your crews, your, not so much your staff, but if it's your crew leads, foremen, whomever, Element needs to know if you're putting them out in the field, how much you are charging or how much they are charging to be put out in the field. So what is it costing you out of pocket to put member A, B, and C out in the field for this job? It needs to know the wage cost. How do you add that in? You simply go into your settings, manage user and staff, pick a staff member. Um, so let's just pick, let's say Ryan, right? So you pick Ryan, you go into edit staff member. Okay, and from here, it's gonna say, hey, time tracking and payroll right here. click time tracking and payroll, and then there's a tab called wage cost. Add in the wage cost for this employee, okay? Whatever it is they make per hour, you add in that wage cost. And then you say which budget it's coming from, because again, that overhead allocation, right, field or labor burden, all of that needs to be accounted for. It's gonna put in the labor burden from the actual budget that you pick. So my labor burden is 11.39. And just a really quick refresher for those of you, our labor burden is any indirect cost associated with the employee, right? That goes beyond hourly wage. This is used to calculate true cost of labor for accurate job costing. So, what is labor burden? Things like payroll taxes, right? Workers' comp, employee benefits, vacations, holiday pay, all those things go in the labor burden. And in your budget, it accounts for those. We're not in a budgeting class right now, but I just kind of want to tell you about it for those of you who might not know. Okay, and then if there's any overtime, you add that in here. And what is the overtime factor? Time and a half, right? You add all of that in here. And then you go ahead and you add that wage cost. And now there is a wage cost added for Ryan. Okay? So that's how you would essentially add in the wage cost for the employee. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the job costing tab. And what I'm going to do from here is we'll talk about those tabs. If you go under job costing, there's two tabs within job costing. The first tab is the job costing overview, and the second tab is the scoreboard. Okay, so we'll talk about both of these tabs. Oh, what's going on? Sorry, one second, guys. For some reason, my mouse has stopped working. One second, let me see what's going on. Sorry about this.
All good, Eliza. Has your mouse had enough today?
Probably. I've been working since 7. I think it's just it does that. The battery came out. One second. Let me
Just needs
fix
its
this.
15.
Yeah, I got it. I got it. Okay, got it. There we go. All right. So, sorry about that. Let's talk about scoreboard before we even go into job costing overview. The scoreboard is going to be your, I'd like to say visual, right? Representation of what's going on with your job and what's going on more specifically with the labor that's in your job. So it's going to show you how much labor is accounted for garden beds and patio. And how does it know this? Well, it's coming from your estimate, right? When I created my estimate, I put in the labor hours for garden beds and for patio. It's going to take those labor hours, put them in here, and as I create timesheets or as my crews start clocking in to do this job, it's going to automatically populate here saying, hey, they did 10 hours out of the 100 for garden beds. They did, maybe 7 hours for patio. It's going to populate and show me the percentage of how much of this job is completed. If I ever go over hours, it's actually going to mark it as red. Okay, so it'll let me know, hey, you're going over hours for this specific job. So it's going to give you that visual representation. Right now, it's blue because I only have my estimated hours. My actual hours have not started yet, right? I just made this into a job, so I have no actuals for this job. Okay, so that is your scoreboard. Another really important prompt before we even go into job costing overview is called job groups. Now, I'm going to talk about job groups when I talk about settings, but one thing you should do for every single job you create is add them into a job group. This is just going to keep you organized in all aspects, especially for reporting. So I'm actually going to go ahead and add this job into Lex's group. Why not? Lex, this is part of your group, right? Let's say Lex deals with all design build jobs that are, garden heavy. So I'm going to put it in Lex's group. Okay, so now let's get into the good stuff, the overview of job costing. This is going to give you your overview of your actuals versus your estimates, right? I've said this before, I'll say it again probably, but this is essentially what we're doing. We're doing our actuals versus our estimates. We'll let it load for a second. It's not just my mouse that's tired today, clearly. Um, Let me just refresh it and see if that works. Hmm. We will give it a second, but that's fine. While we wait, I just kind of want to pause here and ask if anyone has any questions about anything we've learned so far. I know we're just getting into job costing, but the back end prompts or anything we've spoken about, are there any questions for that? Guess no, maybe so. Are we all following along okay so far with just these settings and the back end of job costing? Yes, no, maybe so. Are we all good? Are we all tired? I know it's middle of the week, Wednesday. Thank you, Reed. I hope I'm saying your name right. And Nelly as well. Perfect. Okay, so it is ready to go. Now let's talk about job costing overview. The overview of job costing, as you see right now, everything is zero because I actually haven't started this job. The revenue is going to show here. So my revenue is essentially my invoices, right? Those invoices that get created when they're generated, my revenue will show up here. Okay. My profit. So what my net and my gross are all going to show up here as well once the job gets started, as well as my cost. So what is it costing me to get this job done, right? My cost or my estimated cost is coming here. And if wondering, hey, where are all these numbers coming from? They're coming from the estimate. And actually, we should probably open the estimate so we can compare and contrast. So everything here is coming from the estimate, right? My total cost, what my total price is going to be, the profit I want to make at the end. It's all kind of transferred over when I created the job. Action items, if there's any action items that need to be done for the job, for example, creating invoices, timesheets, wage cost is, it's going to show up in the action items tab for you. All right. So the first or the way that we actually trigger our actuals, there's technically four ways to trigger actuals in Element, okay? The four ways we trigger actuals for job costing are one, invoicing, two, timesheets, three, vendor bills, and four, we can also do manual adjustments, all right? So main are the three, but four manual adjustments can also be added. We're going to talk in detail about these three triggers for job costing. Okay. And when I say triggers, I mean what increases these numbers or what tracks your actuals. The first trigger is invoicing. What do I mean by invoicing? When you created your invoice schedule, okay, it gets transferred over. So when I took this estimate, right, with the contract and I synced it to a job, that get transferred over here. My deposit, my milestones, right? All of it gets transferred over here. Now, anytime I go to generate an invoice, that becomes potential income or revenue for LMN under job costing. The invoice does not need to be paid for. The invoice does not even need to be approved. The second I create an invoice, Element assumes there's potential revenue and it's going to populate that in the job costing tab. Okay, so that's really important. The invoice doesn't actually need to be paid for. A lot of times when customers come in, they're like, hey, hold on. Why is revenue showing up in job costing when my invoice hasn't been paid or when I haven't approved the invoice? The way job costing works in Element for invoicing is as soon as you create an invoice, right? Which means you take the invoice, you click the generate button, and it gets created. Element thinks, hey, this is going to be potential revenue. I'm not going to wait 2, 3 weeks until the invoice gets paid for, right? Or all of that to start showing it in the job costing tab. That's not very, efficient in the case, that's not efficient because we want to see our potential revenue and job costing and we want to see it quickly. So we don't want to wait 3 weeks for revenue to populate in the job costing tab. So just one thing to be sure of is or understand is the second an invoice is created, the revenue populates in job costing, okay? And let me show you how that works. So let's say today is August 13th and I've started the job, or I'm going to start the job, and I'm going to take my deposit. I'm going to click the invoice button here, click yes because I'm generating the invoice, okay? Click OK. And now this invoice has been generated. Note that it's still in pending mode. It hasn't been approved, it hasn't been paid for, but it's been generated. That's all I want to show you today. Okay, so the invoice is generated. Now let's go back to the job costing tab. Overview. Okay, something has changed. Can you guys tell me what that something is? Anybody? Chris, now it shows revenue, RAID, revenue ticked up, action items show on track. Correct. All of you guys are correct. Thank you for answering. Yes, the revenue has now increased 30%. The 4,133, that is the deposit payment that I just created. Okay? So that is showing up here. And yes, my action items are all on track. So that's the first way we can trigger actuals in our job costing tab by creating those invoices. The only thing that would be triggered when you create invoices or generate invoices is the revenue. Nothing else, okay? But the revenue will be triggered and it's going to show you exactly how much revenue you made for this job. So if you create all three invoices and you send them over to the customer, the revenue will be showing up as 100%. Okay? Now, the next trigger, and before I even go into the next trigger, I have a question and I saw it in the chat. Raid, we are currently not sending invoices with LMN. Is that going to throw things off if they remain unsent? Lex, do you want to maybe speak better to this? I think they will throw things off for the revenue, not so much for anything else.
For sure. So, I'm assuming, Reed, when you're saying that they're unsent, that you're not sending them to the customer through the Element software. For job costing, we do need our invoices to be generated, as Eliza has shown you, so that you can see in that first revenue tab, it will populate. If you aren't sending invoices through Element, or you're not keeping it clean, I guess I should say, it more so is going to throw off or impact things like analytics in terms of like aging columns, etc. So I wouldn't say for uh, job costing specifically, it's the end of the world, but it definitely can impact kind of analytics, etc., those types of pieces down the line, and just general organization and centralization of that process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Lex.
Of course.
Yeah, I think one thing that's also important to note is that your revenue will be populated, or at the most time for design build jobs especially, is populated by those invoices, right? So it's always going to show action items are not on track if you don't invoice. Even if you're processing payments through other avenues, it's important to still use Element for invoicing. I understand if it's not in your, processes as of right now, but eventually I think that is important. Not just for job costing, as Lex said, right? Analytics is also a big one as well, for invoicing. All right. So now let's move on, guys, to the second trigger, which is timesheets. And I think this is one of the most important triggers. This is where you're actually going to start to track how much labor, equipment, materials, and so on are used through timesheets. So when your crews go in to create a timesheet, right? Whether it's through the Crew app, it should be through the Crew app, or if you do it, through Element Admin, not the case most times. But when you're creating those timesheets, in those timesheets, you track your equipment, your labor, your materials, and then that populates for job costing. Now, because this is a design build job, I'm not tracking my every single equipment and labor as much. But if I want it for job costing, this is a prompt I need to do. I need to go into materials and equipment right here, okay? And I need to make sure that anything that needs to be tracked is being tracked. Now, I want the most accurate job costing possible. So I do want to track my main materials, and my main equipment. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to track all of these on the timesheets. Okay. And I'm also going to track the quantities. Now you might be wondering, hey, Eliza, this is not a time and material job. This is a design build job. I've already accounted for my materials. I already accounted for everything in the contract. Yes, I understand that. But here's the thing. I recommend you track your main materials, okay? You don't have to track every single one. But materials and equipment, you should track them on timesheets and you should be tracking the quantity for those main materials because we are trying to not only compare actuals to estimates, but we're also trying to give you a better idea of how or what your actuals are for those estimates, right? So if you have estimated 10 bags of concrete for your patio build and your crews are tracking those bags on the crew app, let's say they end up using only 8 bags of concrete. Well, you've now overestimated 2 bags for the job, right? Now you know, hey, for this area, you actually only need 8 bags. How do I know that? Because I allowed my crews to track quantity. So it's up to you guys what you want to track, but I recommend one, tracking all items on timesheets and tracking your main equipment and materials for quantity as well, just to give you guys a better idea. Okay? Even if it's not billable. Now, if this was a time and material job, I would be billing for these bags per unit or per variable. Okay? But because this is not time and material, I'm not billing for them. I'm just tracking them. Does that make sense to everyone? Why we want to make sure these prompts are ready to go? And yes, sometimes when a job gets transferred over from an estimate, these will not be automatically enabled. You have to go in and you have to manually enable them to be tracked. Okay, so make sure that prompt is done for your timesheets before you start creating a timesheet. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a timesheet with you guys together. This is not something that you're going to be doing, right? Crews are doing it out in the field, but just so we know what's being tracked, we'll do one together. I'm going to go in to my timesheet tab, timesheet list, and let's create a timesheet together. Again, this is not a crew app training, but everything kind of flows with job costing. There's lots of different parts to it, as you guys see. But let's create a timesheet for today. Let's pretend we're crews out in the field making a timesheet. I'm going to hit punch in. And let's say Beth. So Beth is working today. Hit next. And oh, Lex's group is already open, so I know which job I'm using, which is right here, job costing demo. See how easy it was for me to find the job because I put it in a group? Hit next. And let's say we're going to do a patio. So we're doing patio. And we're going to start the job at 9 a.m. So let's say we started the job at 9 a.m. and we ended the job at 10. So we worked an hour on the job. Actually, I want to do a few more hours. So let's say we started at 6 a.m. and we finished at 10 a.m. for today. Go next. Okay, it's going to say, hey, what materials did you use for patio? So let's say I used the crew truck and I only used 3 hours of the crew truck and I used 1 bag of concrete. Continue. Perfect. Finish. There we go. Now all I have to do is submit the timesheet for it to show up in the job costing. So a timesheet must be submitted. Again, your crews are probably already doing this, right? They're making the timesheets and they're submitting them over. So I'm going to submit the timesheet. No lunch was applied. Submit. That's it. Now that the timesheet has been submitted, let's go into the job costing tab and see what's changed. Alrighty. Give it a second to load and then we will see. Okay, so under labor, okay, so under labor, we did patio, right? And we did 4 hours. We've estimated this amount for our labor, but hold on. There's nothing in my actuals, guys. It's $0 for actuals. Can anybody tell me why that's the case? Anybody? And then, nope, the timesheet does not have to be approved for it to show in job costing, but that is a very good guess, Chris. There is something that is missing. Read, no hourly rate. Correct. There is no wage cost added for Beth, the employee that I used. And if anything like this ever happens, just look in your action items. It's going to tell you update wage cost for one staff member. All right. Who is it? It's for Beth. So if I click on this, I'm going to add a wage cost for Beth. Let's say Beth is making $25 an hour. Click add, save. Alrighty. So now if you see here for patio, the actual, according to Beth's wage cost, $111.40 were used for this job for the 4 hours that we worked. All right, so it's very important to note why that wage cost is important. It's not going to populate the labor if you don't have it, but your action items will always keep you in check. This would be an average for a crew, right? So the average for a, yes, so no. Wage cost would be what the actual labor cost for that employee is. So if you get paid them per average for the group, let's say I pay my crew leads an average rate, or I pay my lead hand an average rate, and I have 2 or 3, right? You would put that in. But what your actual cost is to put them out in the field, so in their payroll, what they get paid, that's what you put in here. Okay? Alrighty. Now, just quickly, materials and equipment should also populate. There it is, right? We used 3 hours crew check, 750, and then materials, whatever materials we used will also populate here. Perfect. All right, so that is the second way to get your actuals or trigger your actuals through timesheets. Let's talk about the third way, which is vendor bills. And I think in the chat, I'm not sure if you answered it, Lex, there was a question about vendor bills, which I
Yeah.
think you answered. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go ahead and make vendor bills. Vendor bills is for tracking your materials. So if you're not tracking your materials on timesheets, you can track them through vendor bills. So let's say you go in, you start a job and you have to go into your nursery or your Home Depot, wherever it is, you go to grab your equipment. You can actually allocate that equipment through vendor bills through the actual job. And let me show you how that works. If I go under this tab called vendor bills and I create a vendor bill for today. And by the way, you can use just vendor bills for job costing or you can use timesheets. I like using both. I think it's the perfect blend, right? Using timesheets to track my labor and my big materials, and then using vendor bills to track those smaller materials, which I'm not tracking on timesheets. So let's say I go in for this job, right? I go to Home Depot. I add in my bill reference number, my PO if I want, and the bill date. I can also queue my vendor bills to QuickBooks. So if you have someone in your company who's already, supplying receipts in QuickBooks, you can transition that to LMN and then allocate those for specific jobs and then export it over to QuickBooks. All you have to do is click this button, Queue to QuickBooks. You can also upload the receipt. So if you want to upload the receipt copy as well and have a paper copy for your, notes and for your documents, you can do that here as well. So let's say I went to Home Depot. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in those line items. So let's say I went and I got some flowers from Home Depot. Okay. I got flowers. I can add the quantity and the cost. Here is where my estimate comes into play. If you don't have your vendor bill open with you, right? And you're just adding this in, you can actually go into your estimate and just compare and contrast. Chances are you will have your vendor bills on you though, but I don't because this is a fake scenario. So I'm going to use my estimate. And I'm going to say that I bought some flowers. I bought 10 of these shrubs, which were $25 a pop. I'm going to add that in. So I got 10 and they were $25. All right. And maybe I got some, I don't know, some bushes too. Where are they? We're just gonna use, okay, let's use this one, 20, and they were $30. I got 20, so I went and I bought 20 for this job, and they were $30. Perfect. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these flowers and these bushes, which are very, very vague descriptions, and I'm going to allocate them to an actual job so they can become more detailed. What does that mean? When I click allocate, it's going to say, hey, what job? Oh, did I forget to save this one? Let's add item. Oh no. 20, $30. And then we'll just call it bushes. Okay. Now, when I allocate this or when I click the allocate button, guys, all I have to do is add the job that it's part of. And because I'm creating it within the job, it's going to automatically assume the job it's part of is this job costing job. Okay. And then it's going to say, hey, do you want to allocate this item further? Yes, I do. I can keep it vague and I can say, hey, this is part of materials, right? I don't have to put in every single flower, every single bush, every single thing I ordered if I ordered like 10 or 20 of the same ones. I can just allocate them to materials. But if I want to go into more detail, and I go down, I can actually add in what type or what I'm using. So I believe this one, which I called flower, which I know is not a flower, is the azalea. Okay, and then this one is this one, I think. Yes, perfect. So now I'm going to allocate and allocate. And now it actually attaches this to the actual material that is part of the job. Okay. So now when I go to, create a timesheet and I use the material, it's going to populate that material from these vendor bills, whatever it is I use. Okay. And it's allocated to these vendor bills. So let me see. Or let's just go back to the job. No, I want to save my changes. Always same changes, guys. Okay, overview. Okay, so if you look in materials, it should be there. There we go. So the azalea I added, the 250, it's there. And then the bushes are all there as well. My estimates versus my actuals based on those vendor bills I added. Alrighty, so those have been added in. And my bad, it does not allocate based on the timesheet. It just gets added in as soon as you add that vendor bill. Okay? So because I added those vendor bills, these are good to go. Now, here's the case though. So what we hear a lot is, hey, I don't go to Home Depot and just buy the equipment I need most of the time for that one job. I might actually be going into my, wherever it is I go and get my items from and buy big bulks. So let's say I go in because I need to buy concrete. I'm not just going to buy 10 bags of concrete. I might buy 100 bags of concrete so I can use them throughout the year, right? I'm just buying that 10 bags. How am I going to create the vendor bills for that and then allocate them? Very good question that nobody asked, but you know what? It's been asked before, so I'm just gonna tell you guys how that works. If that's the case, you don't need to go into the vendor bills here and add vendor bills. There is a tab in Element. Where is it? Where is that tab in Element? I think it's under Jobs. Yes, there we go. The last tab here is called Vendor Bills. When I click the Vendor Bills tab, I can actually go ahead and create a vendor bill for those bulk items that I bought. So I'm going to click the plus new. And let's say, again, I went to Home Depot or Site One or wherever it is you guys are going, put my bill reference number, right? And then I can make a note saying concrete for the year. Okay, I bought all my concrete or maybe concrete for the quarter. For the quarter. All right, this is concrete for the quarter. I can upload the receipt, go add items. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and just name the item concrete. If I knew how to spell it, that would be great. And then let's say I bought 100 bags. So I bought 100 bags of concrete. How much does my bags cost? Well, I have the bill, but I'm just going to make sure. My concrete costs $10 a bag. So I went and I bought $10 per bag for my concrete, add item. Perfect. Now, if I ever needed to use this bag of concrete for a job, I can just click on it under the vendor bills tab, go into allocate right here, and then allocate this bag of concrete for whatever job it is I'm using it for. So for example, I can find the job. So let me find my job costing job actually. Hmm. I believe it's this one. Let's hope so. And then I can go ahead and allocate the materials from that job. It's going to pull them up from the job, bagged concrete. And let's say instead of using 50, I ended up using 4 bags. Okay? Allocate. Perfect. Save. Now, if I close this, it's actually going to show me that, hey, I ended up using this bag of concrete, right? It's only partially allocated because I didn't use all 100 bags. I only used 4 bags. So it's actually going to show me that it's partially allocated to a job. If it's all been done and all been used, it's going to have a check mark next to it saying, hey, you've used every single material in this vendor bill, right? So there's a check mark. But if it's only a little bit used, it's going to be partial. And if it's not used at all, it's going to be bling because it's unallocated to a job. So let me see how that looks in the actual job costing tab because I use that concrete. Hit refresh. Okay, and let me go into my materials. There we go. Oh, was this not the right one? Oh, it was. Yes. Okay. So we have our actuals of the bag of concrete that was used, which was 10 bags. And then you have the price right here. So it did allocate it to whatever it was used, which was the 4 bags that we ended up using. Alrighty. And that is the, I guess, final trigger of how or how that works. Now, there is one more which I talked about, which is manual entry. Is that the most efficient way for job costing? Not so much, right? Because we want those timesheets and we want those vendor bills and we want those invoices to see my actuals versus my estimates. Now, things might happen where you might need to go in and add a manual entry. If that's the case, this is how you would do it. You would click on whatever material it is. So let's use one we haven't used, which is this one. Okay, and then you go in and you add a cost manually. So you say, hey, I ended up using 3 of these. Okay, and that is my unit cost. Let me just double check if that's the case. Nope, the unit cost is 2. Oh, yeah, it's right. That is my unit cost. Perfect. Okay, so you add in your unit cost and then you hit save. Okay, and that will manually adjust the job costing for you. Is that the most accurate way to do things? No, because technically you're going in to manually add it, so you don't know your actuals versus your estimates to what's happened. But sometimes things happen where you have to go in and manually adjust a cost. And that's how you would do it if that's the case. All right, so 4 triggers or 4 actuals or how to trigger them, those are the 4. If you guys don't take anything away from today's training, I want you guys to, at the very least, remember these 4 triggers to show the actuals and job costing. And just because this is a class and I like to test, can anybody tell me those 4 triggers? Whoever is first can put them in the chat. Even if you just know one of those triggers, put them in the chat. I want to see who was paying attention, who was listening. Let me know those 4 triggers. Reed is saying labor. Labor, yes, Reed, labor is a trigger, but there's something that comes with the labor that triggers it. So what is the one thing that triggers it? So how do I know how much labor was created? Guillemore or Guillermo. I'm so sorry if I'm spelling your name or pronouncing it wrong, but yes, timesheets, you are correct. It is timesheets. So what triggers that labor is those timesheets, right? Labor rates. Labor rates are very important for timesheets. They are a prompt or a setting, but not so much a trigger, Chris. But yes, that is very important to remember as well. So those are the prompts for those. But the first prompt is timesheets or trigger is timesheets. What is the second trigger? Does anybody remember? The second trigger, we have timesheets. What is the second trigger? And it has something to do with this. Jay, you are correct. Invoices, right? That revenue. The second trigger is invoices, creating those invoices. The third one, there's one more important one, and we just talked about it about 1 minute ago. Just showed you how to add them. Amy, vendor bills. Yes, you are correct, Amy. Vendor bills. Yes. And then there's another Amy who said vendor bills. All right. Amy's are on fire. Correct, guys. And then, of course, the fourth one, which is manual entry. So good. It's great to know that we are all paying attention and listening. This is awesome. And that is one of the most important things I want you guys to take away from today's training is the triggers. I know it's a lot, right? There's a lot to remember for job costing. It's not just creating the estimate or creating a job from the estimate and then comparing it. There's ways to trigger those. If you know these 4 ways of triggering and you use them, do you have to use all of them? No. If you're not using vendor bills, you can just use timesheets. If you're not using timesheets, you can use vendor bills for material tracking. If you're not invoicing, you won't get the revenue, but you can just manually add that in, right? If that were the case. So very, very important, but thank you so much, guys. That is essentially all I want to talk about for today's class. I don't know if there's any questions in the Q&A. Oh, Eric asked, why does the concrete show the actual, or why doesn't the concrete show the actual numbers? Let me see what you're talking about. 10 bags, 100. Oh, that's actually a very good question as to why it doesn't. Is it because I'd created it through a vendor bill, Lex, and not no, because that wouldn't be the case. It was
Can you
also created to,
open up the vendor bill?
yes.
I just want to see how it was set up.
So these are the two. So the first one was created from,
Okay, if you just want to click into it, I'm wondering if, yeah, go to add line items.
this is
So,
glitches. So this is not even concrete. Hold on. That's wrong.
yeah, I'm just
Let's go back.
wondering. It most likely is due to the vendor bill, but
This one is queued. What is
it's
going on?
because there's no quantities in here currently. So, did you add a manual adjustment for concrete?
No, I didn't. I added it for one of the flowers. Where is my vendor bill actually for concrete? I know I used concrete for one of the jobs. In the timesheet, I actually used concrete for the timesheet, but there we go. Okay, so concrete, I used 100. Okay, and then did I allocate it?
Yeah, let's
I
just
did
see.
allocate it. I used 4 each.
Oh, can you go to job costing demo, concrete bag for, okay, so that should be
Mhm.
allocated. Yeah, it does look like it's the vendor bill. I could double check that, but
It should show though, even with the vendor bill, because the other flowers I did were showing. So it might just be a little, it might be a glitch, but I can double check for you and see why that's not showing, and then I'll email you after, Eric, because it should show. There might be something in the back end that's not doing it. I think I did all the steps though.
hmm,
So we'll let you know, Eric. We can email you after to see what happened. It might just be a glitch if this is the case. Uh,
yeah, I think your account's been a little silly goofy today, so it just might be that as well.
Everything's been a bit silly. It always does this when I have to present. Alrighty. Do we have any other questions? I see the chat is populating. Uh, if I split in the line items, not allocation, and it works. Okay, Jean, I split in the line items, not allocation, and it works. I can try that after as well and see if that works. And then Reed had a question. We're in the habit of just using the total dollar amount of materials as line items on an estimate. Example, plant materials, 1,000 instead of 1,000. Yes, that is an acceptable practice if you have a large amount of materials that are essentially the same, right? So if you have plant materials and you have $1,000 for those plant materials, you can use it that way as well. The reason I did it the way I did it is because I actually want to know for my company, right, of how many flowers I used, how many bushes I used, how many, plants I used for this job. For more accurate reporting and job costing, but I get it. Most companies don't want to add in every single item one by one, especially if they have like 20. Okay, so that's totally fine and totally acceptable if that's the way you're doing it for job costing. But for those big items like concrete, or maybe there's an expensive plant you're using. For example, I have one here that's quite expensive, which is this one right here, my Acer, right? Those are the ones I would want to track one by one, just for my own knowledge. And then any chance of the amount paid being shown on job costing? No. So the amount paid wouldn't be shown on job costing. That would be shown under your timesheets. Yeah, so that would be shown under timesheets as well as your invoicing. So if an amount gets paid for via Element Pay, it's going to automate in the back end under the payments tab right here. It's not going to show within the job costing. No, the amount that's due, so the invoice due is going to show for timesheets, and then the amount that's paid is going to show here under invoice payments, under the payments tab here. So whenever an invoice gets paid for, if you're using Element Pay, it's going to automate here. If you're not using Element Pay, you have to manually add in the payment. Okay, we talk about this in our invoicing training, which is next week, guys. I don't want to get too into it because it kind of diverts from the job costing training, but it will not show in the jobs tab. The payments don't show, it only shows potential revenue, which is what I showed under the overview right here. So it only shows that potential revenue of invoices created or generated. All right, I hope that helps. I'm just going to open up my closing slides because we do have about 5 minutes, but the questions have been great. So happy to see all of the engagement and the questions. If you have any more, put them in the Q&A or the chat. If we don't get to them, we'll be more than happy to email you afterwards. And guys, if you were following along with me today and you're like, hey, something didn't make sense, or maybe I need to ask a few more questions about this, feel free to email the community inbox and let us know, and we can set up a quick 15-minute chat with you and kind of go through your account, right? We'll be more than happy to do that if that is needed or if you guys want that. No problem. And you have a great day too, Amy. Really important. Not only future events, right? Our tomorrow event is Foundations of Scheduling, but Crew App. If you're new to Element and you're just learning things, off onboarding, learning those foundations, I highly recommend joining Foundations of Scheduling. More importantly, though, Crew App training. Guys, we are sunsetting our Element Time app. So if you have been using Element Time, it is no longer going to be available to use as of end of October. So please jump into those trainings and learn the Crew app while you have the time, right? I know summer is a little bit easier, so please learn those Crew apps. And then really, really cool, fun announcement. Our Academy Bootcamp is back. It used to be called ACP, but now it's called, I think, ABP, right? Academy Bootcamp. So it's called, if you guys want personal live one-on-one training for anything with the software, right? It's going to be a 3-day event. We're going to talk about the beginning till the end of using the software, and it's going to be an in-person training. So if you want to join those trainings, please email the community inbox and I'll be more than happy to send you over some more information. And it's also on our webpage. So those trainings are really good. They're extremely valuable. I'm going to be part of them as well for some of them, but we have some great trainers. And then Element Pay, I talked about this a little bit, but if you guys want to get paid for your invoices, right? And have those payments done with an Element, you're already invoicing through Element, right? You're getting your data from invoicing. Why not also get paid through Element? It's essentially cheaper than processing through QuickBooks. And the value of it and the efficiency of it is what is the real kind of value, I'd like to say, right? You send the invoice over, your customer pays for it via email, and then it gets automated in the back end in LMN. What more can you ask for? And then Greenius, this is our sister software. So if you guys are currently hiring lots of crews and you want those crews trained, we have over 120 training materials from things like HR, safety, right? Power tool safety, chainsaw safety, all of that. You get your crews trained. There's quizzes and checklists for most of them. They do those quizzes checklist, right? They get, approved or they pass, and then you've done everything to hold yourself accountable for their safety. So that's very important, and I think this is a great kind of useful tool to have for that. And then Growth Accelerator, that's what Lex is part of. It's just one-on-one dedicated coaching for you within LMN, right? They help you meet your business goals. They're there for you through those meetings, which I believe are bi-weekly or every few weeks, as well as they're always available via email as well. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. It's been great. If you have any other questions, I don't know, Lex, if you're currently answering questions, but if you have any other questions, please put them in the chat or email the community inbox. All right. We have about a minute, so I'm just going to close it off, but I'm looking forward to hearing from anyone who might need the extra assistance. If not, I'll email the recording over at the end of today's training. All right. Have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you on the next one.